In this video, we will break down how the Uniform Guidelines on Employee Selection Procedures define validity, and how you can use those standards to build fair, legally defensible hiring processes. The Uniform Guidelines apply to any tool you use to make employment decisions. This qualifies as tests, interviews, application reviews, work samples, even training program success. If a procedure has adverse impact, your organization is expected to show that the procedures used are job-related and consistent with business necessity. This is done through a validity study. Under the guidelines, there are 3 acceptable types of validity evidence: criterion, content, and construct validity. Criterion-related validity answers the following question: do scores on our selection procedure actually predict job performance or other important outcomes? Content validity answers the question:
does the assessment represent the actual work and required knowledge, skills, and abilities of the job?
Construct validity answers the question: does this assessment measure the traits that research shows are important for doing this job successfully? Here's a real-life scenario that discusses these 3 types of validity. A fire department is hiring firefighters and wants to be sure its assessment tool is solid from all 3 angles. They start with a detailed job analysis. They research the job and meet with experienced firefighters to pin down the key tasks and the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed to do the job well.
They build a written job knowledge test where each question is directly tied to those tasks and KSAs. The items sample the real content of the job. They also define the underlying traits they are trying to tap, such as knowledge of firefighting procedures, ability to follow complex instructions, and safety awareness, which theory and past research say matter for firefighter performance.
After using the test in hiring, they track how new firefighters actually perform on the job. When they compare test scores to later performance, they find that higher test scores tend to have better performance than lower scores. Start with a rigorous job analysis. Identify critical work behaviors and the knowledge, skills, and abilities needed for successful performance.
Standardized administration and scoring. The guidelines emphasize accurate, standardized administration and scoring for all applicants, especially when tests affect who is hired, promoted, or advanced. This includes consistent instructions, trained raters, and clear scoring rubrics for interviews and work samples.
Monitor adverse impact and consider alternatives. When a procedure produces adverse impact, you must review its validity evidence and consider equally valid alternatives that have less adverse impact when available. That might mean adjusting cutoff scores, weighting, or replacing one assessment with another that is still job-related but fairer in its impact. Document everything. The guidelines specify detailed documentation for validity, including when and where studies were conducted, the job analysis, sample description, criteria used, methods, and results. Good documentation is your best defense if your selection procedures are challenged. It's important to remember, when you ground your hiring tools in job analysis, you're not just complying with the Uniform Guidelines, you're improving the quality and fairness of every hiring decision.